Welcome to the 23rd lecture of the course on sociological perspectives on modernity. We are in the midst of the 6th module of the course, that is Deconstruction of Modernity. Okay? In Deconstruction of Modernity, we have the feminist challenge to the central pillars of modernity. Then we have towards cultural studies, and then we have the postmodernist challenge to the critical modernist paradigm in sociology. Okay. In the last two lectures, we have already discussed the feminist challenge to critical modernity, and in this lecture today, we are going to discuss deconstruction of modernity through the lens of cultural studies. How cultural studies emerged? Cultural studies is based on few theoretical perspectives. It straddles between Marxism, feminism, postmodernism, and the perspectives of the marginalized sections of the society. Okay. Thereby it challenges, it poses key challenge to critical modernism. Okay. In this lecture, in cultural studies response to critical modernism, we are going to discuss three authors. One, E.P. Thompson, The Poverty of Theory, Raymond Williams, towards 2000, and thirdly, Michel Foucault. Okay? But again, we will discuss Michel Foucault in detail in the postmodernist challenge. E.P. Thompson and Raymond Williams, these two, okay, they represent socialist humanism within cultural studies, and Michel Foucault represents radical post-structuralism. Okay. I am just giving you some kind of background that within cultural studies what do we find? Socialist humanism as well as radical post-structuralism. Socialist humanism is represented by E.P. Thompson and Raymond Williams, and whereas radical post-structuralism is represented through Michel Foucault's works. Okay. Keeping this in mind, we are going to discuss deconstruction of modernity through the lens of cultural studies. Okay. Let us first see how cultural studies emerged as a part of social theory or social thought, political thought. Okay. History of social thought as a differentiation, when we mention, if you look at this differentiation, okay, history of social thought as a differentiation from the perspective of cultural studies. Okay. Now there are three important thought currents which have become the hallmarks of cultural studies. Okay. What are those three thought currents? One is based on the way there was a split between, philosophy on the one hand and history on the other was treated, was examined by the Greeks, okay, Greek philosophy, and an important political theorist, Machiavelli. Through Machiavelli, we always say that it is Machiavelli's works, in fact, marked the birth of modern political science, and the way industrial revolution, critical thinking, rationality, reasoning capacity, critique to religion, the whole project of enlightenment, okay, the way it started treating economics, anthropology, sociology, history, and so on in modern senses, philosophy, history, everything. These three thought currents are extremely important in the context of cultural studies as a part of history of social thought. Okay. Now, why such split occur between philosophy and history? or you may say economics and anthropology. Why such splits? These splits are also historically conditioned. Okay. Philosophy initially was divided into two parts. One, natural philosophy, and two, moral philosophy. Okay. Natural philosophy is alternatively known as science in the modern sense. Science, the term science was coined by Weber in 19th century. Earlier science was known as natural philosophy. Okay. And moral philosophy, the way today we treat moral philosophy, I mean philosophy as a whole, that used to be considered moral philosophy. Or ethics, the world of ethics. Okay. That's why when we look at philosophy of science and so on, okay, we tend to combine natural philosophy as well as moral philosophy. Okay. Epistemology as well as ethics. Okay. And why I said that Greeks, the way they treated or the way they examined the split between philosophy and history must be understood in this context. Okay. History again is based on very important theoretical as well as empirical investigations. Okay. Now, cultural studies doesn't want to see such kind of artificial split between philosophy and history, or economics and anthropology, or sociology. Okay. And why I have emphasized more on birth of modern political science by Machiavelli. Okay. This is very important in the sense that the concept of the state, the concept of the citizen, nation building, nationalism and so on, civil society. Okay. All these things emerged through, in a more modernist sense. Okay. These things emerged in a more modernist sense through the works of Machiavelli. Okay. These three important philosophical thought currents must be understood while examining cultural studies' response to critical modernist paradigm in sociology. Each of these three simultaneously addresses itself to specialized category of human experience and attempts to project this as account of the whole. Okay. Human experience is very important. Okay. It is not any structure or agency or something, but it's always the way the proponents of or the theorists of cultural studies, they try to bring about a critique to the linear view of modernity. Human experience is the most significant aspect when you examine modernity and its constituents. Okay. There are a series of attempts to reverse this, of course. Okay. Reverse this process. Suppose, for example, Marx and Weber are classic examples. Both link, both Marx as well as Weber, they link economy, polity and culture so far as human experience is concerned. Okay. Human experience for Marx or Weber cannot be examined in isolation. Human experience must be examined, should be examined in terms of our economy, culture and polity. Society. For example, class consciousness, ideology in the case of Marx. Okay. In the case of Weber, you may say status, religion, culture and so on. Okay. In later critical versions, the emphasis has generally been on political economy as the central link. Culture is reduced to ideology, status symbols and so on. For example, in structural functionalism, okay, the reverse happens and things are abstracted to the point where values appear as an explanation of everything. Critical political economy is then itself specialized to accounts of the institutions of the formal economy and of the state. In structuralism, what we find that suppose the state the structure, the society on the whole, they determine our actions, they determine our human experience. But critical political economy suggests no, our institutions are built and we continue to revise our institutions on the basis of human experience. Okay? I mean, it is the relationship between practice and norm. Which is prior, practice or norm? Practice is prior to norms for the proponents of critical political economy. For the proponents of structuralism or structural functionalism, okay, norms are prior to practices. Okay, but for the proponents of cultural studies, feminists, Marxists, critical political economy, okay, practices are prior to the formulation of norms. Once norms are formulated, okay, what the proponents of cultural studies they argue, the proponents of Marxism they argue that once practices human experience, it leads to the evolution of norms, and once norms are formulated, norms also try to regulate our practices. Norms try to at times dictate our practices. Okay? And when our practices undergo change, we also tend to make certain changes in our norms. Okay? There is a dialectical relationship between practice and norms. For the proponents of cultural studies, feminism, Marxism, critical political economy. Okay? But for structural functionalists, for structuralists, okay, norms are prior. Norms always try to regulate our practices. Okay? It is always norm. It is the normative framework which guides our practices. Practices do not determine what kind of norms we are going to have. Okay? In structuralist case, but in the case of cultural studies and so on, practices are prior. Practices lead to the evolution of norms, designing of norms and so on, and there is a dialectical relationship between practices and norms. Okay? Once, that is why nothing is static, even our practice undergoes change, and those changed and changing practices, they also try to transform our norms. That is why norms are also not static, norms are also dynamic. Nothing is static in this world. Okay? Everything is dynamic for the proponents of cultural studies, Marxism and so on. Okay? This is very important. Then, if this is so, that there is an attempt to deconstruct modernity, deconstruct one singular view about modernity, or if I have to put it very succinctly, that while making an attempt to deconstruct modernity, these three perspectives that we are discussing, feminism, cultural studies and postmodernism. Okay. Cultural studies joins, suppose we discussed earlier, okay, there is an analogy between feminism and Marxism. Now we are going to discuss how cultural studies makes an attempt to join feminism in the attempt to broaden the categories used. We will discuss one by one. Okay? When I say cultural studies joins feminism in the attempt to broaden the categories used, what are those categories? Maybe gender, maybe religion, maybe region, maybe caste, maybe class. Now we must broaden these categories. We cannot reduce everything to one particular category. We must widen the scope and ambit of these categories. Okay? Now, the way normally, in general, the way the poor suffer, okay, economically poor people, they suffer. Okay. Now, there is, if I have to reduce everything to economically poor sections of the society, okay, cultural studies objects this. Okay. Cultural studies maintains that, you see, economically poor people, they constitute one of the marginalized sections of the society. Okay? In this case, then women also constitute one of the marginalized sections of the society. Hills, it also constitutes one of the marginalized sections of the society. Religious minorities, okay, they also constitute one of the marginalized sections of the society. Many categories can be created, okay, not simply economic consideration, but also many social considerations, political considerations, cultural considerations and so on. Okay, they must be. We must try to, cultural studies always makes an attempt to broaden such categories. The proponents of cultural studies make an attempt to include culture without reductionism. What is this? Now, whatever we suggest, whatever we do, our human experience, it must be culturally mediated. Okay? But I cannot just say that everything is reduced to culture. No. Suppose people very often say, no, everything is reduced to economy, everything is reduced to polity. No. Cultural studies, scholars drawn from cultural studies, they don't try to reduce everything to culture. They try to include culture in their attempt to broaden such categories without any reductionism. Okay? And by doing that, the proponents of cultural studies, they tend to generate a more adequate holism or totality. Okay? This is very important. Then, in this lecture, we will look at two influential sources for cultural studies. Two influential sources, but three influential thinkers. Okay? Those two influential sources for cultural studies, one is socialist humanism and the other radical post-structuralism. Socialist humanism is very often seen or is represented through the works of E.P. Thompson and Raymond. And radical post-structuralism is represented through the works of Michel Foucault. They are very different accounts. There is a difference between socialist humanism on the one hand and radical post-structuralism on the other. But we will also try to look at certain similarities between socialist humanism on the one hand and radical post-structuralism on the other. Why we are using the term marginal status? Okay, these two perspectives, they have been given marginal status in social theory, political theory. Why? Precisely because they look at that both these two perspectives, socialist humanism as well as radical post-structuralism, okay, they tend to provide perspectives rather than theories. Perspectives are more important than theories. What is a perspective? Okay, a perspective refers to a set of symbols which human beings use to select from all potentially observable aspects of nature. When I say nature, it includes both natural and social phenomena. Thereby, I tend to widen the scope and ambit of nature. Okay? And a perspective is above all a viewpoint. What kind of a viewpoint? A perspective is a viewpoint which enables us in selecting, okay, in selecting, 2, organizing our perceptions, and 3, in guiding our actions. Okay, there are 3 important things in a perspective: selection, organization of perceptions, and thirdly, it must guide our actions. Okay, when I say this, selection, organization of perceptions which guide our actions, okay, people may say that no, perception and perspective are same. No, perception is different from perspective. Perception, when I say, it is the immediate contact that individuals have with nature. But when I tend to organize my perceptions, then I tend to arrive at a perspective. Okay? Perception becomes perspective only when perceptions are organized. Okay? That's why I said a perspective refers to a set of symbols which human beings use to select from all potentially observable aspects of nature. I reiterate this point, when I say nature, it includes both natural and social phenomena. A perspective is above all a viewpoint that helps us in selecting, organizing our perceptions and guiding our actions. Okay? We don't tend to look at everything, we tend to select. Suppose this is a room, I can select something, you may not select that, you may select something else. Okay? That's why it is up to us, it is up to our perspective that we use these things, we tend to select. Okay? In this sense, the proponents of cultural studies, they tend to emphasize more on perspectives than theories. Okay. Cultural studies as a school of thought, it hasn't yet been able to establish any coherent school. Okay. Suppose like functionalism, Marxism, okay. They have not yet been able to formulate these things, cultural studies. Okay. Though cultural studies has not yet been able to establish any coherent school, it has taught people to think and work in new ways. It has taught people to think in and through a problem. It has taught people to think and work in novel ways. Okay? This is very important. That's why both socialist humanism as well as radical post-structuralism, okay, they are very different accounts, but you will find surprising similarities, because both these schools of thought, okay, both these perspectives rather, okay, they have been accorded marginal status within social and political theory, precisely because they tend to stress more on perspectives than theories. They haven't yet been able to establish coherent schools, but they have taught people to think and work in new ways. Okay. Now let us see socialist humanism, and then we will move on to radical post-structuralism. Okay. Now let us first see let us examine in detail, okay, what kind of response that socialist humanism gave to critical modernist paradigm in sociology through the works of E.P. Thompson and Raymond Williams. Okay. E.P. Thompson and Raymond Williams, what we generally find, their works are mostly derived from the Western Marxist tradition. Their works are derived basically from Western Marxist theoretical trajectory. Okay. In Western Marxism, what we have discussed in the works of Georg Lukács, Antonio Gramsci and Alain Touraine. Okay. This is very important that E.P. Thompson and Raymond Williams, they were very much influenced by Western Marxist intellectual trajectory, but their works are informed by lower middle class or working class background and grassroots political activism in the post-communist party regime. Their arguments, the way they make, okay, suppose for Marx, there was a base and a superstructure. Economy was the base for Marx, okay, and on the superstructure that Marx suggested, that all these polity, religion, ideology, everything will be dictated by your economy. Okay. But Raymond Williams as well as E.P. Thompson, they did not buy this argument. For them, there is nothing called the base or superstructure model. Okay. At times economy may be base, at times culture may be base, at times religion may be base, at times polity may be base, state may be the base, your nationality may be the base, okay. Not simply economy. Okay. And superstructure can also vary. Okay. The arguments in favor of the refusal of base superstructure model that E.P. Thompson and Raymond Williams provided, that your economic, culture, polity, religion, region, okay, they cannot be isolated like this. They must be examined in terms of their intersectionality. Okay. Separated levels cannot be isolated like this. For E.P. Thompson, even our politics, our economics are also cultural. For Raymond Williams, even our culture is materially conditioned, right? It is very important to see. Okay. For E.P. Thompson as well as Raymond Williams, okay, I mean, importance must be given to whole way of life or whole way of struggle. For Marx, what was more important? If economy was the base and all religion, ideology and so on, they constitute superstructure, the importance in the Marxist tradition was given to mode of production. Whereas in the tradition of cultural studies, okay, importance has been given to whole way of life, whole way of struggle. Okay, that's why for E.P. Thompson, politics and economics are also cultural, whereas and for Raymond Williams, culture is material. Culture is materially conditioned. Okay. Now, then what is this culture all about? Okay. For E.P. Thompson and Raymond Williams, okay, we'll discuss one by one, I mean, in the context of social movements, holism or totality, and then reflexivity and rationality. Okay, all four we will discuss. I mean, in the context of culture, that is social movements for E.P. Thompson as well as Raymond Williams, because politics and economics are also cultural, and what is then the culture? Culture is also material. Okay. Then for so far as social movements are concerned, how do E.P. Thompson and Raymond Williams try to capture culture? Okay. For them, for E.P. Thompson, it is always, culture is always related to certain classes, that is class culture. Okay. For Thompson, when he said class culture, it is the development of class consciousness idea. Okay. There is close attention to anthropology of popular culture. Okay. I mean, language and ritual, needs and expectations, formation of resistant popular agency. What is this popular culture? Popular culture is represented by the masses, mass culture. Okay. High culture is represented through elites, whereas popular culture is represented through socially, economically, politically, culturally marginalized sections of the society. Okay. That's why Thompson's examination of anthropology of popular culture, okay, may be made through language and ritual, needs and expectations, formation of resistant popular agency and so on. For E.P. Thompson, human experience as a junction concept between domination, subordination, subjugation and exploitation on the one hand, and formation of political and cultural resistance on the other. Okay. Human experience also tends to move away from domination, wants to move away from human experience, always wants to move away from exploitation, subjugation, subordination and so on. Okay. But when it moves away, okay, what does it lead to? It leads to the formation of organized, intellectually and politically more conscious resistance, political and cultural resistance. I mean, then that class culture, development of class, okay, if you can slightly recall Marx's notion of class, classes are manifestations of economic differentiation. Okay. For Weber, classes are there are two components of class, one is life chances, the other causal components. There are different ways to look at classes. For Thompson, in his the poverty of theory that he suggested, that class culture, okay, that development of class consciousness idea must be located or must be situated in the world of human experience. Okay? That's why class as relation or as experience. That's why when Marx said classes are manifestations of economic differentiation, what does he mean? What did he mean by that? I mean, classes are constituted not on the basis of income that one earns, but on the basis of the position that one occupies or the functions that one performs in the process of production. Okay? Then there is a relationship between different classes. The relation is not simply of relation of domination and subordination, but exploitation. That's why class as a relation must be experienced. Okay? Class culture and human experience, okay, must be understood together. Okay? For Raymond Williams, as he mentioned that culture is material. For Raymond Williams, culture in lived experience, human experience, our lived practices, lived experiences and so on. It may include place, community, kinship and so on. Okay? There must be a close analysis of formation of cultural production as material institutions and not simply disembodied authors. Okay? For Raymond Williams, okay, I mean the analysis of formation of cultural production as material institutions and not simply disembodied authors, I mean that lived experience cannot be isolated from culture, from our economy, from our polity and so on. They cannot be, they are very much embodied, not disembodied. Okay. Raymond Williams also emphasized on the recovery of class relation or class experience within a particular language. That's why some forms of language, they dominate other forms of language. Okay. Some languages, I hope all of you know that certain languages, they dominate others. Okay. I mean, in India, English has been able to dominate all other languages, right? Okay. And that particular language, okay, the way it produces and reproduces different class relations or class experiences. Okay. And it then when you tend to make concerted political and cultural resistance against such domination, against such exploitation, then culture becomes a very important variable, okay, to bring about social movements. Okay. Now when we come to E.P. Thompson, socialist humanist response to critical modernism through the works of Thompson and Williams. Okay. When you look at how holistic explanation that Thompson and Williams provide, for E.P. Thompson, there is a distrust of overly sophisticated abstractions as an exercise in intellectual closure. Okay. And that's why we must understand the dialectical relationship between experience and thought. Theory cannot be generated in vacuum. Theories have never been generated in vacuum on their own. Theories have been generated only through human experience. If there is no human experience, then we cannot generate any theory. If there is no human experience, we cannot generate any form of knowledge. And E.P. Thompson's The Poverty of Theory, okay, is a classic example where he mentioned that as the capitalist relations of production as the kernel of society. Okay? They are very important dimensions of society that the mode of production has brought about. When E.P. Thompson emphasizes more on, emphasizes particularly on capitalist relations of production, as a mode of production, Raymond Williams immediately suggests that no, it is not mode of production, but it is a whole way of life, whole way of struggles. That's why there is a distrust of specialization for Raymond Williams. that aims for looser but more encompassing concepts, loose but coherent. Okay. Now, I mean in towards 2000 he wrote that from mode of production to way of life. Okay. E.P. Thompson's work, I mean the poverty of theory, Raymond Williams, culture and materialism and so on. Okay. Now, E.P. Thompson, so far as reflexivity and rationality are concerned, okay, Thompson emphasizes more on artisan model of determination by material data of theory, I mean interaction working with the material, okay, Thompson's, and he refused, Thompson refused such inductive analytic reasoning in abstraction from lived experience of subjects, okay, sharp refusal, okay, I mean from particular instances to general statement, that is inductive reasoning, okay. There is an implicit identification with subjects and relevance to present day struggles, okay. And E.P. Thompson emphatically mentioned what is rationality, that must be dialectic rationality, okay. And we'll discuss Raymond Williams, how he used, he said no, it is not dialectic rationality but synthetic rationality. We'll discuss this, okay. I mean, what is this dialectic rationality? Dialectic rationality doesn't aim at or claim neutrality. Dialectic rationality always attempts to interact with material, I mean culture is material, and using it in present day context, okay. And E.P. Thompson's strategy of circularity between material and concepts in the poverty of theory, okay. The central question of whether this is a search for truth or more likely a search for present day meaning in history, okay. This is very important. For Raymond Williams, okay, was very much influenced by the Frankfurt School, I mean in Germany, okay. I mean that critique of dominative mode attitude to world, other, self as raw material. For Williams, there is a need to connect with lived experience, reflexive position, lived experience of emotion and so on, okay. I mean there is nothing called the rationality for Raymond Williams or E.P. Thompson. For Thompson it is dialectic rationality, okay. For Raymond Williams it is synthetic rationality, I mean refusal of specialized rationality. There is an implicit reliance on fully human nature of the author or writer or the self or the individual, okay. That is that synthetic rationality or reflexivity in refusal of separation between private emotion and public analysis, private feeling and culture on the one hand, public economy and politics on the other, okay. This cannot be separated just like that, okay. There must be a relationship, we must provide synthetic rationality or reflexive. And what we generally find, that you will tend to find humanism or socialist humanism in both the works of both Thompson as well as Williams, okay. That humanism in both cases, okay, socialist humanism in both cases, I mean there is a radical use of language of fully developed human being and of human needs, I mean meaning versus systems of domination and exploitation, human commonality and class difference must be understood, okay. And there must be an analysis of implicitly grounded in shared humanity and shared class struggle, okay. So in this lecture we have discussed deconstruction of modernity through the lens of cultural studies, through the works of E.P. Thompson and Raymond Williams. I mean we have covered only one part of cultural studies, that is socialist humanism, okay. In the next lecture we are going to discuss radical post-structuralism through the works of Michel Foucault. Thank you.